Hi there! Welcome to Pallet University. So we're back again today with another video reviewing and talking about some of the biology of some of the art of the incredibly talented Joshua Dunlop. All of his links, like last time, will be down in the description below. This is my first video I'm recording in my new setup, in my new apartment. I am back in South Dakota. This won't be the first video that you see of me in this set, though. There'll be the last week's video I'm recording at some point in the next day or so. But I haven't quite figured out the lighting or the fact that this room is very echoey yet. Ideally, that'll be fixed a little bit when I have a bed, so I'll have some fabric in the room to absorb some of the echo. But if this video is a little echoey, that's why. Anyway, today we're doing some more, like I said, biology talk about some of Joshua's art. So last time the video was quite long. I didn't realize that until I was editing it. And some people said that, all of your feedback on that video was excellent. But the main feedback was just that it was kind of long, which I didn't realize because I recorded each segment individually and then didn't realize how long and how much I ramble until I was editing it all together. So today we're only going to be doing the rest of the starters. We did the Bulbasaur line last time. This time we're going to be doing the Charmander and Squirtle lines, which are interesting because he just put out new art for Charmander, Charmeleon, Squirtle, and Wartortle, and also Ivysaur and Bulbasaur. And I might go back and talk about those in a later video. But for this one, I want to talk about some of the differences that he decided to make when he sort of updated his art. So this is the original one of Charmander. When was this from? Let's see. So this one was published 3 years ago. It was posted on the website where he posts all of his art. Like I said, that will be down below. Yeah, 3 years ago. So let's talk about it. So clearly it's based off of a dinosaur instead of a lizard. It's very hard, I think, to base a bipedal reptilian-like animal, or Pokemon in this case, off of something that's not a dinosaur. So, pretty obvious choice. However, it doesn't sort of, I don't know, just sort of some of the proportions to me strike me more of not really like a theropod dinosaur, or at least like the typical theropod dinosaurs like T-Rex. To me, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the roundness of the skull and it's not sort of elongated. Reminds me a lot more of something like a Dryosaurus instead, which is also a bipedal dinosaur, but it was one that was made to be rather fast, and one that was sort of like the lookout for the herd. Dryosaurus typically would hang out in herds of Stegosaurus in the Jurassic, and they would just sort of hang around the Stegosaurus because they're so big, and they'd hang around them for security, but Stegosaurus could not see very well, so Dryosaurus would be like the lookouts for the herd. This is definitely the vibe I'm getting from at least this version of Charmander. We'll see when we talk about the second version that is very different. But I think the straightness of the body, that's real small. Need to make that a little wider. There we go. So, one of the main things about dinosaurs, especially that we've learned in the last 30 to 40 years, if you look at really old dinosaur stuff, is that they're bipedal with their arms up here and their tails dragging on the ground. But that's not real. That's not how they were. Their backs and tail were much straighter. As you can see from Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park did this very well. But I think it looks very cute. Its very large eyes, I think, are very endearing. I feel like that's just a trait inherent in humans. I think that's actually something that's hardwired into our brain, is to think that things with bigger eyes proportionately to their face are cute. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I really love the scale pattern. We'll zoom in a little bit. Because dinosaurs, generally know what their scales look like, but scales don't tend to be preserved very well. It's very rare that we find scale impressions of dinosaurs, but I think that this looks very good. The feet, I think, generally look like bird feet, which is good. That's what they're supposed to look like. And also a really big thing that I enjoy is the hands. So, with dinosaurs, we're not able to do this with their hands. So, it's called pronate and supinate your wrist, is the biological terms for that. So they just didn't have the ligaments, and the structure of their bones just would not allow them to do that. So this is something that actually I was praising Jurassic Park a second ago. That's something that Jurassic Park does wrong, is that they picture all of their dinosaurs like this, or at least with their palms facing down, but dinosaurs could not do that. Their palms were stuck facing each other, and the way that I have heard it phrased in a way to remember is that dinosaurs were clappers, not slappers. So just a fun little anecdote there. But overall, I really, really like this. I like how he has some steam coming out of its breath, it looks like. Anyway, I've rambled around about this one enough, so let's take a look at the new one that he posted like less than a week ago. This one I think is much more cartoony. I think the previous one looks much more like it could be a real animal. This one looks very cartoony, and it looks almost old school dinosaur like, with its hands up like this, with its spine almost vertical, not quite vertical, and then with the tail, looks like the tail sort of curved around and not sort of just like down, dragging on the ground, which I guess is a good thing because it's on fire. But this one definitely looks like it's much more inspired by the typical theropod dinosaur, like a tyrannosaur or something, which I do think makes a little more sense, mostly just based on the skull. Like the snout looks a lot more elongated, and like last time, I'm sure that if I didn't remember to put it in editing, I'm gonna be mad. But right below me, there should be like the official art of Charmander, and I believe its snout does sort of come out like that, if I'm not mistaken. I'm actually gonna look at that. Okay, so it's in its official art. It's actually kind of hard to tell because it's like a front view, so you don't get to see the profile. But looking at a lot of its sprites over the years, oh, you can see them too. But yeah, looking at high quality editing. In a lot of its sprites over the years, you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit. So like its original ones from Gen 1, it has very much like a very high head, but also a very sort of bulbous snout almost. Gold and Crystal, I think, do a really good job of showing that. But anyway, back to the art. Yeah, so I think this looks more correct to Charmander's actual art, whereas the previous one looks more like something that is more plausible to have in nature, if that makes sense. I really like the teeth choice, which once again just sort of affirms that it is definitely based off of a theropod dinosaur. Whereas if you look at the teeth of this one, they're still there, but they look a lot smaller and a lot less pronounced. Yeah, I guess that's all I kind of really had to say about Charmander. And I feel like that's just kind of a common theme that he did with the older ones versus the new revisions, is that he basically the older ones look more realistic, but the newer ones look more accurate to the art. But anyway, I've spent 10 minutes rambling on about Charmander, so let's move on to Charmeleon. So Charmeleon, once again, is very seemingly accurate to being a dinosaur, with its its art is it being vertical back, bipedal, whereas this one, the back is much more horizontal, as well as the tail, with its arms sort of hanging down, like you would see in a typical dinosaur. And this one has very much a like Velociraptor, Dromaeosaur type of vibe to it. But something that's actually really interesting to point out between this one is that I said just a second ago that this is the older one. This one was also posted a couple years ago. that the older ones tended to be more realistic, while the newer ones tended to be more accurate. This one mostly follows that, except for the hands. So the hands here are very much, there's no like fingers, it's just like hand and then just goes right into the 3 claws. Whereas the newer one actually does give Charmeleon fingers, which I don't believe it has in its art. In any of its art, actually. I'm going to double check that, but I'm not going to show you guys this time. Yeah, it doesn't really have fingers. Like, the claws are sort of curved like they are fingers, but this just has them straight, like claws would be. So here, once again, the scalation looks really good. The feet look like bird feet, except they look like they might not go as far back. There's not as much of like a heel, even though the heel is technically like up here, to the foot as there probably should be. Once again, I love the way they did the horn, and made it sort of like a Parasaurolophus-like crest. And then the way they did the labial scales as well as the eyebrow scales looks really, really good. Looks like there's a little bit of steam or like smoke maybe coming out of its nostrils as well. So again, just an incredible touch. I can't imagine how long this took to make, but let's take a look at the other Charmeleon, the newer Charmeleon from just a couple days ago. As you can see, this one looks a lot more accurate to its art. It's much more upright, similar with what I talked about with Charmander, with, you know, back more or less upright, with the tail sort of curving around, although this one looks more like it's curved up and not sort of around the body like it was with Charmander. And here's what I said about giving Charmeleon hands, or like, you know, fingers to its hands instead of just the claws. But you guys, like I said, you should be able to see that right below. The teeth are something that I actually liked less about this one than the other one, because, I don't know, I kind of like when the teeth are sort of understated, because it looks much more natural. You know, these teeth look good, but they don't really look accurate to me if it's supposed to be based off of a dinosaur. And obviously with it being, you know, vertical backed bipedal, like a human almost, it's probably only, you know, very loosely based on a dinosaur. But the teeth, mostly that they're just like this one right here, that's, you know, significantly bigger, as well as this one right here. That's not really how dinosaur teeth were. You can actually see it quite well, not in any of these photos, unfortunately, but dinosaur teeth were more consistent, not incredibly consistent, in which tooth was bigger. So it's not like there'd be more of a gradation, so it'd be like smaller and then they get gradually bigger until the biggest tooth, and then they get gradually smaller again. Whereas this one seemingly is just large for no reason. And I'm just sort of confused about it. Overall, once again, the scalation looks really, really nice. I like that they actually give it a white stomach like the official art actually has. And interestingly, he gives it a vertical pupil here, which tells me that this version of Charmeleon is nocturnal. Which is interesting to me, because if we look at the previous one, the pupil is rounded, and that might just be because it's bright outside. It might still be a vertical pupil, but because it's rounded, that tells me that it's diurnal and is awake during the day, whereas this one is awake at night. And also, I don't even know, what color are Charmeleon's eyes actually? Okay, they are blue. So this one, yeah, this one's much more accurate with the blue eyes compared to this one, which has sort of reddish eyes. Interesting. Once again, the horn looks really good. I like how they give it this sort of ridge of scales up the middle of the forehead. I actually like the way that looks a lot. And then the feet. The feet almost make it look kind of chunky. Because I don't believe it would have the sort of almost roll over the feet. At least not this pronounced. So I find that kind of interesting of a design choice. If you guys would like to see me potentially get, you know, Joshua on for an interview or something, let me know that down below as well. All right, let's move on to Charizard. Charizard only has one art, and this one is from a number of years ago. Let's see, how long was it? So this piece of art of Charizard was also published 3 years ago, and you know, the original theme with, you know, the original Charmander and then the original Charmeleon as well was very like dinosaur looking. Like I said, very horizontal, backed bipedal, like a dinosaur, whereas with Charizard, he's just like, no. Nope, I'm going full dragon, which obviously makes sense. So, just a lot of the choices I really like. I like making these two big sort of chin scales. I'm sure that has a technical name, but I don't know what it is. Almost like an iguana. Iguanas have that one, especially the males, have the very big scale like on the bottom of their jaw. And I'm not quite sure why that scale is there, what function that serves, but I think it's really interesting. I really love the way he depicted the fire breath. How it starts off as this little stream of like blue, really hot flames that then just gets really big and red to show that it cooled down a little bit. The teeth look very good. Charizard, I think, only has in its art only like the 4 teeth, like one on either side of the snout, and then same thing with the bottom, one on either side. And he shows that well with larger teeth in those spots, but obviously those are not all the teeth that Charizard has. I think it's interesting that he chose to give it an antorbital fenestra, which is, let's see if I'll decrease this size here, which is this part here, which to me says that he's saying that this is still like dinosaur adjacent, because dinosaurs are the only reptiles that have that. I think crocodilians used to, but their skulls are just very fused now that they don't really have that. Basically, it's just another hole in their skull. Antorbital means, you know, in front of the eye. So it's just an extra hole that was used for muscle attachments generally, but also probably just to lighten the skull a little bit. I really like the way he did the horns and made them almost like giraffe ossicles, or ossicones rather. Whereas he didn't make them sharp, which would be used, you know, in like defense. I think these are much more just ornamental horns. I like that he didn't go like full dragon and to give it like spikes down the back or something, because I feel like that would be like one of my first impulses to if I were drawing a dragon. The arms are really interesting in that he gives it like these massive pectoral muscles, but the arms appear like really stubby. And maybe these pectoral muscles are actually what operate the wings, which would make sense to me. Just because like the muscular system of an animal that has arms and wings on the back would just be an absolute mess. Which is why we don't see that in the, you know, real life. But yeah, so I would assume that these pecs are drawn so large because they would control the wings in addition to the arms. Maybe there's a second layer in there that controls the wings instead of the arms. I'm curious why he chose to draw the arms so small and also like borderline Naruto running. So it's just another interesting design choice that I'd like to pick his brain about. The feet look really good, although I'm curious why it's dragging its toes on the ground. Not quite sure why. The belly vaguely looks like a lighter orange than the rest of it, which I think is supposed to be Charizard's like white or like eggshell colored belly, but it's not super distinct. So I think, I don't know, I think I would have liked to have seen, it is definitely smoother, which I think makes sense compared to like the rough scales like up on the pecs, or you know, these large scales down here. It looks like there's like a big scale right here, and maybe another one here, but I'm not sure. But it makes sense that that would be like sort of smoother, or at least have larger scales, because that wouldn't need to be as mobile or as flexible as, say, like the arms, which, you know, naturally would move a lot. I do like these scales on the bottom of the tail, but I don't actually know if the underside of Charizard's tail is also sort of that eggshell color. I'm not sure. And then one last design choice that I actually thought was really interesting was his decision to include this, because while yes, that is in Charizard's art, it's not the same color as the rest of the wing. It is, you can see it inside the wing, but it is like just sort of a ridge inside the wing. But he draws these basically like the wings of a bat almost, where it's like this right here would be the shoulder, this would be the humerus, and then this would be like the radius and ulna, and then right here would be the hand, which I think is a really good way to depict that, personally. And then also this like flap of skin right here is also pretty accurate if you were drawing this based off of bat wings, because I believe bats do also have that piece of skin between their like shoulder and their wrist as well on this side. Alright, so I think I've rambled about Charizard enough, so let's move on to Squirtle. Alright, so here we have the original art of Squirtle, and he draws it much more like a sea turtle, where it looks like you can very vaguely see some sort of finger structure, as well as, if we move over here, a little bit of like toe structure as well, which Squirtle obviously does have, but sea turtles kind of don't. I mean, they still have all the bones, but they're just all, you know, sort of together inside the flipper, as opposed to like separated like you see a little bit here. Which I thought was really interesting, because I don't typically think of Squirtle as a sea turtle. I think of it as like a pond turtle, like a red-eared slider almost, or something like that. The shell I think looks incredible, in that he draws it well, in that so turtles sort of grow their shells really interestingly, where it's like each scoot. So these each of these, you know, individual things are called scoots because they're bone and scale sort of combined. But it starts off in the middle, and then like they sort of grow rings around the outside as the scoot needs to become larger, which he's drawn definitely, at least on that one. Then you can see it as well on the shell here. You can see all these like nice growth rings on the top side of the shell. I also really like his choice to give Squirtle like a beak. I think that makes a lot of sense because turtles do. As we'll see once we get to Blastoise, that kind of goes away. But I really like the scalation pattern as well, because it looks just like a turtle, or a sea turtle, definitely. Scale patterns between sea turtles and pond turtles are a little different, but especially like the head looks very sea turtle-y, especially once again with those large eyes that just make me think that the Squirtle's very, very cute. And then the tail, it's a little tough to see with like this sort of seaweed in the foreground, but I'm not really sure what you know, normal Squirtle's tail is supposed to like be, because it looks like it's sort of like curled in on itself, and I'm not sure if that curl is like a pattern or if that's just like the structure of the tail, but it looks like Joshua drew it as sort of like a combination of both, where it's like he does have this pattern, but it's just like an indent in the tail, which I thought was really interesting. But we get a better view of Squirtle in the more recent one from, you know, less than a week ago, because it's on land. So this one, as you can see, is much less sea turtle-y, I think. You know, the digits are much more defined. In this, he still gives it this nice beak, which I think is, again, a really good choice. The scalation on the head still looks about the same. The shell is really interesting in that it looks... I'm not quite sure why, but it looks like he changed the color of the plastron is like the name for the underside of the shell. But the plastron in this one is very clearly like a very tan light color, whereas this one it's sort of like a dirt brown color. And I'm not sure why, because in the original art it is that tan color, as well as sort of this part right here that like goes around the arms and like separates the plastron from the top part is called the carapace. Is also supposed to be like a whitish color, which he shows really well here. But here he just doesn't. That's also like a dirt brown sort of color. So really interestingly, there's a really interesting choice that he made there. So then moving, the head looks basically the same, still very cute. And then when we get to the tail, this is a much better shot of the tail, where it does look like that's actually curled in on itself, and that's not just like a pattern or just like an indent in the tail like it sort of looks like in the previous one. This one looks like that it does sort of just curl in on itself, which is interesting that he has like two separate interpretations of it, you know, over a couple of years. The scale patterns here are interesting in that they don't look super obviously to me like any animal that I'm aware of, because I know tortoises have a very like non-defined scale pattern in that they're just large scales sort of everywhere on the forelimbs, whereas this one, it has like these wide scales going down the middle of both, you know, the front limbs and the hind limbs, and then smaller scales on either side. It looks like there's even like a little like ridge of scales right here, which I think is kind of interesting. So I'm not sure. I'd like to ask him what animal he used for the scale pattern for this version of Squirtle, because it's not one that I immediately recognize. Interesting. Anyway, let's move on to Wartortle. So this is the original Wartortle, and I'm not gonna lie, this one kind of creeps me out. I don't know why. It's definitely just the eyes, because yes, you can see a little bit of red in them, but like they just look very black and like demonic. And then also something about like this creepy smile, which he does also still give it sort of a beak, even though it does have teeth, which Wartortle does have teeth in its art. But yeah, I don't know. And I know that this is not Joshua's fault. This is like whoever designed Wartortle originally's fault. But like I never understood why the ears were furry, or frankly why it has ears at all, because it's a turtle. The scales look very good. They look very, again, sea turtle-y, or even almost tortoisey as well. He gave it sort of the original Charmeleon treatment, where the claws just sort of pop out of this like nub. There's no like defined fingers, which again is accurate to Wartortle's art. The plastron looks, you know, pretty, you know, like it makes sense. Most turtles do have just the 5 scoots on the plastron. Some do have an extra one that sort of comes around like this. But I'm not sure how that works, you know, like which groups have which plastron set. I'm not sure which one's which, so this could be accurate to whatever sea turtle he's basing it off of. I'm not sure. Because of the water, it's a little hard to get a good view of like the scalation on the feet, but it looks fine. The digits look a lot more defined than they did on the original Squirtle. And then the tail, once again, obviously with it being like furry and fluffy, never made sense to me because it's a turtle, but whatever. Again, that's not Joshua's fault at all. I don't know, this just made me, I don't know why, but it just creeps me out a little bit. Anyway, moving on to the more recent Wartortle. So the ears and tail still look fluffy, which, like, again, not at all Joshua's fault. That's what both the Pokedex says and the art looks like. So for being a fluffy turtle tail, it looks really good. I like the view of it out of the water, or like away from the water, so you can see it better. The claws are much more, they look like they're actually attached to fingers instead of just coming out of a nub, which I like a lot better. Really interesting choice here in that he chose not to connect the plastron to the carapace, which is the case in a lot of snapping turtles. Snapping turtles only connect the plastron to the carapace on the sides, like right here, because they do a lot more walking than a lot of other turtles do. Which is so, like, without it being connected up here, they have a lot more like range of motion for their front legs, which makes it easier to walk. So that's an interesting design choice that he made. The face looks a little too anthropomorphic to me, which I get it. It's a Pokemon. Most of them are pretty anthropomorphized, but it looks a little too like a bad like Spider-Man villain or something. That's like the vibe that I'm getting from just like the look on its face, like the sort of creepy, vague smile, as well as these eyebrows definitely give it like malicious vibes. Again, not quite sure where he's getting his inspiration for the scale pattern on the legs. The front limbs look pretty turtle-y, but the hind limbs, I'm not quite sure where he's getting his inspiration, and I'd really like to ask him. And finally, I said that this video was going to be shorter, but it's definitely not. Anyway, Blastoise. So, like I said, the only thing to me that looks like a turtle about Blastoise is the fact that it has a shell. This face, to me, looks like a bear. Which, I guess, like, it makes sense because, like, it has ears, and, like, this looks like Blastoise's face, but, like, Blastoise itself doesn't really look like a turtle. Which is always, like, why I've never been a big Blastoise fan. I really like the way he draws the cannons. And that they're a little smaller than I would expect, but, like, it makes sense because it has to, like, be able to withdraw them into its shell. I like that he draws them as sort of cracked and, like, made out of bone, basically, almost, like, sort of like the shell. Which makes a lot more sense than them appearing to be metal in most of, you know, Blastoise's art. I like that he draws the shell in various places with lots of these, like, sort of cuts or scratches or cracks in it, because a lot of older turtles do have that in the wild, just because you know, they get into fights or just various things happen that crack their shell over the years. Once again, we see just some claws coming out of nubs as well. I think he draws the arms very, very well, in that this is basically almost exactly how they look in the original art, but he makes them like look like that's how they should be. You know, he doesn't make it look out of place at all, which I really appreciate. Now I'm really interested in sort of the scale inspiration here, because this doesn't look like it has any scales on it at all, or if it does, they're very, very small. It actually doesn't look like it has a ton of scales on it at all. Now that I'm actually sort of looking at it, it looks almost like a toad skin. Actually, that sounds a lot more accurate. You can see maybe a little bit of scalation, like here on the eyebrows, or you can see a little bit right here, or along the nose especially. You can see some scales there. But yeah, it looks like very toady to me and not at all turtle-like, which again sort of makes sense because Blastoise does not look like a turtle other than the fact that it has a shell. Alright, so I know I said this video was going to be shorter. That didn't happen. But, you know, that really only leaves me with a couple options if I only want to make these videos like 20 minutes long, is that I either only do like 2 or 3 Pokemon, or I cut back a lot on some of the biology stuff, which I did even cut back on some of the biology stuff in this video as well, which I didn't really want to do. So, I don't know, maybe I'll ask you guys in the comments, so hopefully if you comment during this video you'll see it. But would you prefer that I only do like 3 Pokemon per video? Because that would take quite a long time for me to do. like for me to like do all of Joshua's art, which like I would very much like to do. At least most of the like biotic Pokemon, like some of the Pokemon like Magneton and Muck, while they still look great, they're not really like biological. So I don't know how much my particular knowledge set would really apply to them. So let me know that down below. Would you prefer shorter episodes if it meant I only do like 3 Pokemon an episode? Does that sound cool to you? Anyway, let me know your thoughts on all these down below. Like I said, I tend to prefer the more realistic ones to the more cartoonish looking ones. Specifically like the original Charmander and original Charmeleon, I like a lot better than the new revised versions. And that's not to say that these don't look very good, but just I tend to prefer the more biologically realistic looking ones than I do the more accurate to the art ones. Although I still can obviously greatly appreciate all of the work and talent that goes into creating a piece of art like this. So let me know your thoughts on all of them down below. Make sure to go check out all of Josh's links, once again, down in the description. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Pallet_U to keep up on all things Pokemon science. And as always, there's a time and place for everything.